Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, listeners. It is a cool, finally, day here in suburban Chicago. The weather is cloudy, and I would bet it is going to rain sometime soon here in my town. Hopefully not in the next 15 minutes while I'm walking around. Hopefully after that, and I can enjoy the sound of the rain while I'm editing the podcast. It was an eventful weekend for me. My in-laws came into town Thursday, which is why I did not have a podcast on Friday. I was working on resurfacing the top of my back deck, which we got all of the planking down, and now I just have to finish putting in the railing, which will either be super smooth and easy or a real pain in the butt, and I can't tell which it's going to be, but it'll be one of the two. Hopefully the first one. I did also get to play a few games with my mother-in-law here. She really likes playing games, so we played a number of different games. Probably the highlight was the Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle, Game 2 of the Charms and Potions expansion. It's interesting, the Monster Box of Monsters was wicked hard. We had a lot of trouble with that one, to the point where we were messing with our decks and really manipulating the game to try to keep it from getting too difficult. On the other hand, the Charms and Potions expansion we're finding really easy. We're just waltzing through it. Don't get me wrong, it's not fast. It still takes a long time, but there's never any danger. I don't think we ever had more than 2 dark marks on the very first location, the whole game. We were able to keep them down, boom, 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 whenever we could. There's just lots of great examples. We also played a number of other games that were all delightful in a variety of ways. For today's episode, it's been a little bit since I've introduced some new games to you, so I thought I would talk about 3 games I played for the first time recently. That's right, it's time for a shooting from the hip triple shot light card game edition. So the light card game edition, by which I mean to say, I'm going to talk about 3 light card games I played for the first time today, and some of you are going to be very happy to hear what games I played. I don't know. I assume you put a lot of emotional investment into whether or not I'm making my top of the stack, whether I'm clearing games off my shelf of opportunity or whatnot. If you don't, well, maybe this episode won't be as great. But here we go. So the first game that I got to play recently is Cafe Chaos. Now, Cafe Chaos is a game by, I don't even know their name. It's a YouTube channel called The Odd Ones Out. They have a very silly art style with these kind of bobble-headed cartoon figures, and they made a card game called Cafe Chaos, which my son was really excited about. We ordered it on Kickstarter. Actually, we missed the Kickstarter campaign, so we backed it afterward on BackerKit, which became a real problem because every time they would post an update, they would post the update to Kickstarter, and then they would send an announcement through BackerKit saying, hey, if you aren't paying attention to Kickstarter, we just posted an update there. You might want to go look at it. But then the update was for backers only, which meant that if you backed it late on BackerKit, you couldn't see the update on Kickstarter. Why wouldn't you just send the update through BackerKit also? Arg. Anyway, I emailed them about this every single time. And finally, on the very last update that they did, they finally made it public to read. So probably because they were actually delivering rather than announcing that they were late. It was weird. Every time they were announcing they were late, they made the update private. But anyway, so the game finally delivered. It was supposed to be a Christmas game. We got it in late May. So we started playing it right away. We've played it 3 times so far. And here's what I have to say. Cafe Chaos is a game about a food fight at a cafeteria. In the game, you play one of many characters, and each character has their own special power that they can do. The special powers vary in strength, but there are some that are definitely better than others, I would say. You have a number of cards in your hand, and there are a number of cards that you can get during the game. You can get cards from the floor, it's called. Those cards are several different types. There are action cards, there are food cards, then there are 2 different types of food description cards. There's blue ones and red ones. And the food cards are yellow, and the action cards are white. So basically on your turn, you can, so it's a programming game. So you have a number of cards in your hand you can use your action cards or your basic programming cards, and you're going to lay out 4 of those over the course of the round. And then everybody sort of resolves those in turn order, but you only see one at a time what people are doing. So you do stuff like picking up the food, throwing the food, ducking, or doing those special actions which allow you to, say, do something like hit the food back at somebody if they threw it at you. And of course, because it's a programming game, like something like Colt Express, I might choose to duck in the round where nobody throws anything at me, or hit the food back in a round when no one throws anything at me, in which case I've wasted that action, right? The highlight of the game is the art and the names of the cards. When you throw things at people, you're supposed to declare out loud what you're throwing, and the game is generally pretty funny in that regard. The condition cards that you add on to the stuff you throw means that you won't just throw like a gooey sandwich. You won't throw like a steak sandwich. You'll throw a moldy, gooey steak sandwich, for example. And that makes the person lose extra points. Everybody's got like 10 health. If you get down to 0 health, you're out. And the game goes, does the game go until someone, the game goes until someone is at 0 health, and then whoever's got the most health wins, basically. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes to play. It's very silly, extremely luck driven, a nice diversion for, if you have younger folks who want a game that has some give and take and has a little bit of control to what you're doing. The programming element is a nice change over something more simple like War. I wouldn't probably go out of my way to buy it if I were you. But if you have a young person in your life, particularly someone who likes the odd ones out, which my son does, then this might be a good fit for a family filler weight game. That's Cafe Chaos. The second game that I want to talk about today is an old game I backed on Kickstarter for like $9 from Mayday Games. Probably paid another $4 for its shipping. And that's a game called Twist of Fate. Twist of Fate is a simple card game in which you are exchanging, or you're playing cards in front of opponents, and the card gives you something and gives them something. Then after you go around playing your cards until everyone has played 6 cards, and everybody has 6 cards in front of them. So there's a little balancing mechanism where I can't play a card in front of you if you already have 6 in front of you, because we have to sort of balance it out. And then you pick up the cards that were played in front of you, and now that's your new hand. In the game, you have 2 metrics. You have luck and you have shillings. Each metric is controlled by a card that you rotate a quarter turn at a time. So you can have between 0 and 3 luck or 0 and 3 shillings. And anytime that you would go, that you're at 3 and you would add 1 or more, instead you have gained a level through luck or shillings, and you move your token 1 space up this sort of 8 card track of achievement. And the goal is to get all the way to level 8. The first person to get to level 8 wins. Now the game is themed around Oliver Twist, which is why it's called a Twist of Fate. The 6 cards that you have in hand are the 6 characters from the book. And when you play them, the cards are sort of double-sided. Like, think about like a face card in a regular card deck, right? The character faces both ways. But where the numbers would be, you instead have these benefits, and the benefits are slightly different. Like, you could play a character who, I think one of the characters gets 2 luck and loses 2 shillings. And then on the other side, it gets 1 and 1. You gain 1 shilling and 1 luck. So when you play the card, you have to decide which way to set it down. Do you set it down so that the gain 2 luck, lose 2 shilling side is facing you? Or do you flip it around so that you're getting the +1/+1, and then your opponent gets the the other benefit? Now, whenever you play the card, you both take that benefit, and then if either of you has gone over 4 in either or both of your categories, then you're moving your marker 1 or 2 spaces up. It's a relatively simple mechanism once you explain it. It took a little more explaining than I would have thought was necessary for what I thought was a relatively simple mechanism, but once we explained it, it played pretty smooth. The theme is really inconsequential. I mean, some of the cards feel like they make sense a little bit more in terms of, like, Bill Sykes, the big villain of Oliver Twist. He gives you a -2 shillings and your opponent a -2 luck, or you flip it around, it's the other way. So a big part of the game is, like, you would want to use a card like that when your shillings are already at 0. Then you play it so you're getting the -2 shillings and your opponent's getting -2 luck. And now they lose luck, but you don't lose anything because you're already at 0. And of course, every time you achieve the 4, you go back to 0 in that metric. This is a fine little dueling game, or I think it's probably best at 3 or 4, where you can see a bunch of different things that people are doing. It's crunchy decisions. There are crunchy decisions at every moment because you just have these very limited set of cards. And a lot of times both sides are so unpleasant that you don't really want to do them. But it makes for actually a much more interesting play than I would have thought from the simple deck. I think it is 18 or 20 cards. Compared to something like Blood and Fortune, which is another game about putting cards in front of other people and gaining favors. This one's much easier to learn, but I think has a little less depth. The scoring is also much less complicated, which probably makes it better overall than something like Blood or Fortune. It also reminds me a little bit of one of the first games I kickstarted, or backed on Kickstarter, called The Agents, which is a game I really need to go back and play because it's so good. In The Agents, you are playing cards between you and one of your neighbors, so you can't play across the table. But, you have a neighbor on either side, and you're playing cards between you and them. And again, the cards are double-sided, so when you play the card, you decide which way it's facing. So again, you decide which way it's facing, and the way that it's facing determines what kind of bonus you're going to get for playing it, and what kind of bonus your opponent gets when you play it. One of the things that apparently changed between the first and second editions of The Agents, which I have the first edition, is that they removed one element that I thought was really great about The Agents, which is that you could force someone to take an action that was bad for them. By playing a card in a particular direction, you could make them lose ground. And I guess people thought that was too harsh because in the second edition, I guess they made that, they can save that and use it later as a bonus action, which I think is way less interesting, but probably more. The art in Twist of Fate is really good, particularly Bill Sykes and Nancy are both drawn really well. Otherwise, the characters are Victorian England characters, so they all look like they've come out of the Dickens Christmas Village, for example. Overall, Twist of Fate is a fine little filler game. There are other games that have a similar cognitive load that are much more interactive and fun. I would say Coup is probably a better use of your time and energy than Twist of Fate. I would also say you're probably not going to be able to play Twist of Fate. It came out in 2016 from Mayday Games, and I suspect is not available easily to find anywhere. That's designed by Keith Rentz from Mayday Games. That's A Twist of Fate. The third game I want to talk about today is one that I've heard about many a time, both in the edition that I have and in the other name that it's well known as, and that is Schotten Totten, or Battle Line. This is a game from Reiner Knizia, and it was first published, I think, in 1999. It might have been Battle Line first, and then Schotten Totten. The version I got was Schotten Totten. It is published by Yellow Games and has this sort of hilariously madcap Scottish art. So it seems to be a battle between two sets of Scottish clans. It's a relatively simple game. You have a series of 9 stones or cairns that you're fighting over in the middle of the table. And on your turn, there's a series of cards that go from, I think, 1 to 9 in 6 colors. And what you're trying to do is make runs or sets of 3 cards next to the cairns. The best type of run and set would be a color run where you have 3 numbers in a row of the same color. That's the very best thing you could do. Then there's 3 of a kinds and runs and blah, blah, blah. It sort of goes down in scale from there. What you're trying to do is assemble these cards next to a cairn and then claim the cairn. You get to do that in 2 ways. One, when both players have put 3 cards next to a cairn on either side of the table, then you assess the 3 cards, you compare them, and you see which set is better. Assuming one of the sets is better, which I think it would be very hard not to have some place that they compare. And so first you compare what kind of set it is, right? So every 3 of a kind will beat every run that isn't all the same color, for example. But then if you both have the same type of thing, then you add up the cards and see which one has the highest total. Then whoever wins that cairn takes the cairn over onto their side of the table. The game goes until somebody has won 5 of the cairns or 3 cairns that are next to each other at the beginning of the game. So there's this interesting balance where you could be winning 6 of the cairns on the table, but if your opponent takes 3 that are next to each other before you get 5, then they're going to win. The other thing I really like about the game is that you can't claim a cairn until somebody has played until both people have played 3 cards on it, unless you can prove, with logic I guess, that there's no way the opponent can beat your score. For example, let's say that your opponent has put down 2 cards of the same color in numerical order, so it seems like they're trying to make a color run. Meanwhile, you have 3 cards of the same number of different colors, so you have 3 of a kind. Now, if they achieved a color run, they would beat you. But perhaps you can look and see that the cards on either side of the color run are already out on the table in other places. You could say, look, you can't achieve a color run, which means at best you're getting a regular run, which means that my 3 of a kind has to beat you, so I win. And then you get to take the cairn. So I like that element of thinking through the logic of the cards that are available. At the same time, it means like when I was playing, we got about 2/3 of the way through the game. My opponent had claimed like 2 of the cairns so far. And I could see that no matter what I did, they would claim 1 of the cairns on either side of that 3. And so I was going to lose. So I just resigned, which isn't, super fun, but it's weird to play a game that has a sort of mathematical certainty to it and not, shape the gameplay around that mathematical certainty. Schotten Totten is really fun. It's a very small game, plays very quick, maybe 10 minutes. It has the same kind of depth of thinking that something like Lost Cities does, although Lost Cities takes much longer, is more involved, I would say, and has more of a sort of bluffing element to it. This one, or a sort of hoping you draw the right thing element to it. Schotten Totten certainly has that as well, but also has the delicious, terrible choice of having to play a card every turn that you get in Lost Cities, where you're sort of forced at some point to make bad compromises on some of the spaces in order to try to have your best foot forward on the other spaces. Like I said, I have the yellow version, IELLO is the publisher, and the art on it is this sort of wild Scottish warriors, and just a delight. Definitely recommend checking out that edition if you can. Yeah, and designed by Reiner Knizia, as the folks over at Board Game Barrage would say, the one and only doctor. So in order of preference of play, I have presented to you 3 quick card games on the filler level. So what quick card games have you played? What quick card games do you think I should play, but you haven't heard me discuss them yet? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and let me know which games you think I should be playing, and hopefully I'll get to try them out. If you've played any of the 3 games I'm talking about here, also let me know that in the comments, because I would love to hear what you think of any of these games. Thanks for taking the time to join me today on my walk. If you want to reach out to me, you could send me an email, brendan@rattleboxgames.com. You could reach out to me on Board Game Geek, Wombat929 is my username, or post in the aforementioned forums. I also play a lot of asynchronous games on Board Game Arena, Boîte à Jeux, and Yukata.ee. Any of those places, I'd be happy to chat with you. Until next time, thanks for joining me. I hope your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.